The plasma drill whined as Jackson Hayes pushed it deeper into the cavern wall, sending cascades of iridescent mineral fragments showering onto the rough-hewn floor. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cooling system in his exosuit. Mining on Viridian was brutal work, especially in the uncharted depths where the company dispatched only their most experienced specialists. "Hayes, you're approaching the boundary zone. Company says turn back." Eliza's voice crackled through his comm unit. Jackson wiped grime from his visor. "Tell Preston I need another 20 minutes. These ore readings are off the charts." "Your funeral," Eliza muttered. "Channels going dark in these depths anyway." The comm went silent as Jackson pressed forward. 6 months of backbreaking work in these alien mines had yielded barely enough credit to maintain his mother's medical treatments back on Earth. This deposit could change everything, maybe even buy his contract freedom. The drill bit hit something that wasn't rock, producing a high-pitched tone that made Jackson's teeth ache. He killed the power and brushed away debris, revealing something impossible, a perfectly geometric shape embedded in stone that carbon dating would later place at millions of years old. A crystalline dodecahedron pulsed with soft blue light, seemingly responding to his presence. Alien script scrolled across its facets, rearranging into patterns that somehow felt meaningful despite their incomprehensibility. "What the hell?" Jackson whispered, reaching out instinctively. The moment his fingers touched the surface, blinding light flooded the cavern. The crystal liquefied, flowing up his arm like quicksilver, sending waves of information crashing through his consciousness. Histories, languages, technologies, before reforming as an intricate metallic band around his wrist. When he regained awareness, Jackson found himself surrounded by Viridians, the native sentient species whose once great civilization now barely survived on their resource-depleted planet. Their tall, slender forms towered over him, their typically stoic faces showing rare emotion. "The Kalshar has chosen," Elder Mox whispered, dropping to one knee. The others followed, creating a circle of prostrate aliens around the bewildered human. Within hours, Jackson found himself standing before the High Council of Viridian in their crumbling capital city. The council chamber, a cathedral-like space of soaring arches and faded grandeur, held representatives from all 7 provinces of the once mighty empire. High Counselor Drez, her scaled skin showing the pearlescent patterns of advanced age, studied the bracelet on Jackson's wrist with reverence. "For 8 centuries, we have awaited the one who would be recognized by the Kalshar." Jackson shifted uncomfortably. "Look, there's been a mistake. I'm just a miner. I need to report back or my supervisor will." "Your former obligations are meaningless now," interrupted Admiral Krell, his military insignia glinting in the chamber's pale light. "You bear the mantle of Ascension." "The prophecy speaks of an outsider who would restore life to our dying world," Drez continued. "The Kalshar has not responded to any Viridian in generations, yet it bonds with you." A striking female Viridian stepped forward. Her scales held an unusual amber hue, her movements graceful despite the ceremonial robes weighing her down. "I am Thalia, Royal Archivist. The artifact's choice cannot be coincidence or error. Our ancestors built safeguards to ensure only the worthy could bear the Kalshar." "I'm not worthy of anything," Jackson protested. "I barely graduated from Mining Academy. I'm nobody." Thalia's eyes, complex multifaceted orbs, studied him with unsettling intensity. "Perhaps that is precisely why you were chosen." Before Jackson could respond, the chamber doors burst open. Elite guards entered, carrying ancient regalia that hadn't seen use in centuries. Jackson watched in stunned disbelief as they approached with a ceremonial crown. "Wait," he stammered. "You can't seriously." High Counselor Drez silenced him with a gesture. "The Empire falters, human. Our resources dwindle, our colonies rebel, our technology fails. We need the leader promised by prophecy." "Kneel," commanded Admiral Krell, his voice hardened by decades of military service. As the crown descended toward his head, Jackson Hayes, formerly debt-contracted human miner, soon to be Emperor of the Viridian Dominion, wondered if he'd already died in that cave and this was some bizarre afterlife. The crown touched his brow, and the bracelet on his wrist flared to life, cementing his fate among the stars. The Imperial quarters felt cavernous and alien to Jackson, much like his new role. 3 days had passed since the crown ceremony, yet he still expected someone to burst in and announce it had all been an elaborate mistake. He stared at his reflection in the polished obsidian wall. The Veridian royal attire felt wrong on his human frame, too angular, too rigid. The metallic bracelet, however, had seemingly molded itself perfectly to his wrist, occasionally pulsing with that eerie blue light. "Emperor Hayes," a voice called from the doorway. "The advisory council awaits." Jackson turned to find Thalia, the amber-scaled archivist. Unlike the other Veridians with their formal stiffness, she regarded him with unhidden curiosity. "I'm still not sure what I'm supposed to do in these meetings," Jackson admitted. "I can calculate mining yields and operate excavation equipment. I know nothing about governing an empire." Thalia approached, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber's crystalline lights. "Perhaps that's why the Kalshar chose you. Our leaders have been trapped in cycles of thinking that led us to this decline. A civilization needs more than new perspectives to survive. It needs someone who actually knows what they're doing." Her head tilted slightly, a Veridian gesture of contemplation. "Then learn. I've accessed the ancient archives for you. The Kalshar wouldn't have bonded with someone incapable." As they walked to the council chamber, Thalia briefed him on the Empire's desperate situation. Depleted resource veins, failing terraforming systems on colony worlds, increasing military defections, and a population losing faith in their future. The advisory council consisted of provincial representatives, military commanders, and technological specialists. Admiral Krell dominated one end of the table, his decorated uniform contrasting with the simple attire of the others, a visual reminder of the military's growing power. "Emperor," Krell began before Jackson had fully seated himself, "3 more outposts in the Meridian Belt have declared independence. They no longer recognize Veridian authority." "We can't afford another military campaign," countered Counselor Nix, the economic advisor. "The Treasury barely maintains the core worlds." "Then we show strength through examples," Krell responded. "One decisive strike will." "No," Jackson interrupted, surprising himself with his firmness. "Fighting over scraps won't save anyone." The room fell silent. Even Thalia seemed startled by his directness. "With respect, Emperor," Krell said, the title sounding like an afterthought, "you've been our ruler for 3 days. Perhaps military matters should be left to those with experience." Jackson's gaze fell to the holographic display of the Veridian system floating above the table. "What's this mineral composition here?" He pointed to an unremarkable asteroid belt. The science advisor blinked in confusion. "Standard silicates, minimal valuable elements." "To you, maybe," Jackson responded, his mining expertise surfacing. "On Earth, we developed extraction methods for trace elements in similar formations. Those asteroids could yield enough raw materials to rebuild your infrastructure if approached correctly." The council exchanged glances. Thalia stepped closer to Jackson, her voice lowered. "The traditionalists won't accept Earth methods easily." "They'll accept survival," Jackson replied. "Admiral, instead of soldiers, I need your ships to transport mining equipment." Krell's scaled jaw tightened. "As you command, Emperor." Later in the ancient archives, Jackson pored over technical schematics while Thalia translated the more complex Veridian concepts. "You challenged Krell publicly," she noted. "That was bold." "Or stupid," Jackson sighed. "I can feel his resistance. He's led our military for 30 cycles. Control is his nature." Thalia's hand brushed against his as she reached for a data crystal, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "But he's not your only challenge. Many question whether an outsider can truly understand our needs." "Do you?" Jackson asked, suddenly aware of their proximity in the dimly lit archive. "I believe understanding can be learned," she replied, her voice taking on a softer quality that transcended their species' difference. "With the right teacher." As her eyes met his, Jackson felt something unexpected, a connection that defied the vast differences between their worlds. But before he could respond, an explosion rocked the palace, sending ancient texts tumbling from shelves. "It begins," Thalia whispered, eyes wide with fear. "Someone has decided the prophecy was wrong." The assassination attempt, a thermal detonator in the archive passage, claimed 3 Veridian lives but missed its intended target. Security footage revealed nothing. The perpetrators understood Imperial systems too well to leave traces. 2 weeks into his reluctant reign, Jackson found himself fortifying not just his residence but his resolve. The advisory council had split into factions, those supporting his unconventional approach and those quietly aligning with Admiral Krell's traditional values movement. The first mineral shipments from the asteroid initiative have arrived, Thalia reported, entering Jackson's working quarters where mining schematics now covered walls once adorned with ceremonial art. Preliminary analysis confirms your predictions. The trace element yield is impressive. Jackson nodded absently, focused on adapting Earth mining techniques to Viridian technology. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed the minimal sleep he'd managed since the bombing. "You need rest," Thalia said, her scaled hand resting briefly on his shoulder. "What I need is to prove I'm not just a figurehead," Jackson replied. "Or worse, a target. The people are beginning to talk. The markets in the lower district have seen food prices stabilize for the first time in cycles. Small changes, but noticeable ones." Jackson finally looked up, allowing himself a moment to appreciate Thalia's presence. Their late nights working had created a comfortable rhythm between them, her vast knowledge of Viridian history complementing his technical expertise. "I've been meaning to ask you," he said, changing subjects. "The Kalshar, does it communicate with you at all? Sometimes I feel impressions, not quite thoughts, but directions." Thalia's eyes widened. "The records speak of such connections, but not in living memory. What does it show you?" Before Jackson could answer, Commander Vex entered with the day's security briefing. Tall even for a Viridian with battle scars disrupting the pattern of his scales, Vex had initially seemed the most skeptical of Jackson's appointment. Yet recently, he'd become an unexpected ally. "The factory conversions are complete, Emperor." Vex's formal tone couldn't hide his growing respect. "Your mining equipment designs are in production." "Thank you, Commander, and the military situation." "Admiral Krell has redeployed 3 warships to the Meridian Belt despite your orders to focus on transport. He claims security concerns." Jackson exchanged glances with Thalia. Krell's defiance grew bolder daily. Later that evening, in the Imperial Gardens, one of the few places secure from surveillance, Thalia found Jackson staring at the unfamiliar constellations of Viridian's night sky. "My world is dying," she said, simply joining him. "For generations we've known it but couldn't change course. Then you arrive." "And make everything more complicated," Jackson finished. "No," Thalia countered, stepping closer. "You bring hope, different thinking. The nobility see threat while the common people see possibility." The garden's bioluminescent plants cast an ethereal glow across her amber scales. Jackson found himself reaching for her hand, an intimate gesture crossing species boundaries. To his surprise, her fingers intertwined with his. "I never expected to find understanding here," Jackson admitted, "much less." "Connection," Thalia suggested, her typically formal demeanor softening. Their first kiss was an exploration of differences bridged by growing emotion, awkward yet sincere. The biological distinctions between them seemed insignificant against the recognition of something deeper. The moment shattered as Commander Vex burst into the garden. "Emperor, Admiral Krell has called an emergency council session claiming you've proven unfit to rule. Half the council has already gathered to vote on regency." Jackson's hand found the Kalshar bracelet, which pulsed with increased intensity. "Then it's time we settled this." As he strode toward the council chambers with Thalia and Vex flanking him, Jackson felt the weight of an empire's fate in his decisions. His mining expertise had bought him credibility, but surviving Krell's political maneuvering would require something more. The Kalshar warmed against his skin, as if responding to his determination, or perhaps guiding it. The council chamber erupted in chaos as Jackson entered. Admiral Krell stood at the head of the table, mid-speech about necessary intervention for the Empire's survival. "The human emperor implements untested methods while our foundation crumbles," Krell declared to the divided council. "I propose temporary military oversight until you've secured absolute power," Jackson interrupted, his voice carrying unexpected authority. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. The Kalshar bracelet on his wrist pulsed visibly, casting blue light across the ancient chamber. "Admiral Krell, you stand accused of treason against the throne," Jackson continued, channeling confidence he didn't entirely feel. Commander Vex has provided evidence of your redirected military assets and communications with separatist factions. Krell's scales darkened with fury. You have no understanding of what's required to maintain this empire. Your mining projects and resource initiatives are distractions while our enemies grow stronger. Enemies you've been secretly supplying, Thalia added, stepping forward with a data crystal. The archives revealed financial transfers authorized under your encryption key. For a moment, Jackson thought Krell might surrender to the evidence. Instead, the Admiral activated a concealed communicator. Execute contingency protocol, now. Throughout the palace, explosions ripped through key infrastructure points. Emergency barriers sealed, separating Jackson from half his supporters as hidden loyalists revealed themselves. You forced this conflict, Krell hissed. The Kalshar chose wrong. No outsider can save Viridian. As security forces clashed in the corridors outside, Jackson, Thalia, and their remaining allies retreated to the ancient archive chambers, one of the few sections with independent systems that Krell couldn't remotely override. We've lost the palace and 3 districts, Commander Vex reported grimly. Krell clearly planned this coup for months. He controls the orbital defense grid and primary communication relays. Jackson paced the archive chamber, the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. This isn't just about me anymore. He'll undo everything we've started, the resource initiatives, the infrastructure rebuilding. There's something else, Thalia said, her voice trembling slightly as she accessed a sealed section of archives. Something I should have told you earlier. The holographic display revealed ancient schematics, a planetary-scale technological system extending far beneath the surface. The Kalshar isn't just a symbol of authority, she explained. It's a key to the ancestral network, technology that sustained our world for millennia before falling dormant. We've been living on borrowed time since it failed. Jackson stared at the display. And you're only sharing this now. The knowledge was restricted, even from me, until... Her eyes fell to his bracelet. Until the Kalshar recognized its bearer. The archives have been revealing new information daily as your connection strengthens. Can we reactivate this network? Theoretically, but it requires access to the primary node beneath the Imperial Sanctuary. Krell's forces now control that area. Their conversation halted as the archive doors trembled under heavy assault. Vex positioned their few guards strategically, preparing for the inevitable breach. In that moment of crisis, Jackson pulled Thalia aside. Whatever happens next, I need you to know that what's between us is real, not political, not strategic. Despite everything, finding you has been the one thing that makes sense. Their kiss was desperate, charged with the uncertainty of survival. When they separated, Thalia pressed her forehead to his, an intimate Viridian gesture of deep trust. The Kalshar chose better than anyone realized, she whispered. I've researched its patterns for a lifetime, and now I understand. It doesn't seek perfect rulers, it seeks adaptable ones. As the doors began to give way, Jackson studied the ancient schematics one last time, his mining engineer's mind recognizing something the Viridians had overlooked. The system wasn't failing. It had been deliberately deactivated, reconfigured to await specific instructions. I know what we need to do, he said as the first of Krell's soldiers breached the barricade. But we'll need to reach the sanctuary core. Do you trust me? With my world, Thalia answered without hesitation. Blood, both human and Viridian, stained the ancient stone as Jackson, Thalia, and Commander Vex fought their way through the lower levels of the sanctuary. Their small force had dwindled to a handful of loyal guards, but Krell's troops seemed equally disoriented in these long-abandoned passages. The ancestral chamber should be ahead, Thalia gasped, nursing a wound to her shoulder where enemy fire had grazed her scales. But the security systems will be active. Jackson's mining experience proved invaluable as they navigated maintenance tunnels and structural weaknesses unknown to Krell's soldiers. The Kalshar bracelet pulsed with increasing urgency the deeper they ventured, sometimes projecting holographic guideposts visible only to Jackson. Something's wrong, Vex warned as they approached the massive sealed door to the chamber. This passage is too lightly defended. His concern proved justified when Admiral Krell himself stepped from the shadows, accompanied by elite guards. Unlike his soldiers, the Admiral wore ancient ceremonial armor, clearly prepared for this confrontation. Did you think our ancestors wouldn't prepare for the possibility of a false emperor? Krell's voice echoed in the cavernous space. I've studied the prophecies longer than you've been alive, human. Then you know they speak of renewal, not conquest, Jackson responded, the Kalshar glowing intensely on his wrist. Krell's laugh held no humor. Renewal requires sacrifice. The weakest elements must be purged for the strongest to thrive. He gestured to the massive door. The chamber will recognize the Kalshar, but only one bearer may enter. Face me, false emperor, prove your worth. What followed was unlike any combat Jackson had experienced. Not just physical, but somehow connected to the Kalshar itself. As they fought, the bracelet transferred instinctive knowledge of Veridian combat techniques to Jackson, partially evening the match against Krell's lifetime of military training. When Krell's blade finally sliced across Jackson's chest, drawing human blood that sizzled against the ancient floor, the Admiral stepped back in triumph. See, the chamber rejects your alien essence. But the Kalshar flared brilliantly, absorbing the spilled blood. The massive door began to slide open. You misunderstood the prophecy, Thalia called out, supporting the wounded Jackson. It never specified a Veridian savior, only one who could bridge worlds. Inside the chamber, a technological marvel awaited, a crystalline structure echoing the shape of the Kalshar, but planet-sized in scale. As Jackson approached, holographic interfaces activated, responding to the bracelet. The system wasn't failing, Jackson explained through gritted teeth, fighting through his pain. It was evolving. Your ancestors designed it to incorporate new perspectives when needed to prevent stagnation. With a mixture of intuition and the mining expertise that had first brought him to this world, Jackson reconfigured the systems, not restoring them to their previous state, but transforming them. The Kalshar projected his knowledge of Earth resource management and sustainable extraction techniques directly into the planetary network. Krell made one final desperate attack, but Vex intercepted him. The Admiral fell, his belief in tradition and purity dying with him. Throughout the planet, long-dormant systems awakened, dry aquifers refilled, barren soil renewed. The atmosphere began a gradual process of regeneration. What Veridian technology alone couldn't accomplish, the hybrid approach created by Jackson's unique perspective made possible. When it was complete, Jackson collapsed, the Kalshar temporarily dim against his wrist. Thalia caught him, cradling his head. Did it work? He whispered. Beyond all expectations, she answered, tears forming in her multifaceted eyes. You've given us generations of renewed life, not just years. 3 months later, Jackson stood on the palace balcony overlooking the capital city. Green had returned to landscapes long gray with decay. The asteroid mining operations now employed thousands, creating a new economic foundation. Thalia joined him, her formal imperial consort attire unable to disguise the scientist and archivist beneath. The outer colonies have requested reintegration, she informed him. Your reputation grows with each success. Not mine, Jackson corrected. Ours, I would have failed without you. She took his hand, her scales warm against his skin. The council is waiting. They're nervous about your proposal for an elected advisory body. Jackson smiled. Then let's go explain how democracy and tradition can coexist. The Kalshar hummed in agreement on his wrist as they walked together, a human emperor and his Veridian consort, building something neither world could have created alone. Behind them, visible through the palace windows, the first flowers in a generation bloomed in the gardens of a civilization reborn.